December meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. I'd like to begin this meeting by exercising the prerogative of the chair and inserting something here. We had a blessed event in the FCC family this week as Sabrina Maeve O'Reilly arrived to join us, which calls for pictures. 7.1 pounds, 21 inches.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner, you have the floor. You are the man.
I didn't have a lot to do with it. My wife is responsible for all
Excuse
of the...
me?
My wife is... I said not a lot. I said not a lot. My wife is responsible for her good looks and good demeanor. There was one picture, if you would put up. She wanted to welcome herself to the FCC family, so I thought I would add that. But thank you, very kind. We have a lot of sleepless nights ahead of us, and look forward to all of them and God's blessing. And everyone have a happy holiday season. Thank you so very much.
So far be it from me to tell an O'Reilly about things Irish, but Irish is kind of important in our house as well. And my understanding is that Maeve in Gaelic means the cause of great joy. What a great middle name.
Yes, my wife picked it, and it was important to us. And yes, you're right. That's how we found it, and I think it's a perfect fit.
Congratulations.
Thank you so very much.
That's great. That's great. Okay, Madam Secretary, can you top that?
I cannot. I've been dealing with high school finals, so.
Whoa. Okay. Walk us through today, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 2 items for your consideration and 1 presentation. First, you will consider a memorandum opinion and order addressing a petition from U.S. Telecom that seeks forbearance from various categories of statutory and commission requirements applicable to incumbent local exchange carriers. Second, you will consider a second report and order that streamlines, eliminates, or updates numerous provisions of Part 25 of the Commission's rules governing licensing and operation of space stations and Earth stations for the provision of satellite communication services. Third, you will hear a presentation on the outcomes of the International Telecommunication Union's World Radio Conference that took place in November of this year. Please note Item 2 and all items listed under the consent agenda in the Commission's December 2015 Sunshine Notice have been adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. This is your agenda for today. The first item, entitled Petition of U.S. Telecom for Forbearance from Enforcement of Obsolete ILEC Legacy Regulations that Inhibit Deployment of Next Generation Networks, will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Matt Del Nero, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Del Nero.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
Today, the Wireline Competition Bureau presents for your consideration a memorandum opinion and order addressing a petition filed by United States Telecom Association seeking forbearance from 6 categories of requirements applicable to incumbent LECs. This item eliminates obsolete or unduly burdensome regulations while preserving those still necessary to safeguard competition, consumer protection, universal service, and public safety. The actions taken in this item will modernize and strengthen our rules by removing outmoded regulations. With me at the table are a number of people, but not all, who have contributed to this item. It represents nearly 15 months of very intense and careful analysis across the Wireline Bureau and multiple, really all 4 of our divisions. It includes at the table with me Carol Maddie, Randy Clark, Dan Kahn, Heidi Lankow, and Megan Capasso, an attorney advisor in the Competition Policy Division. I'd like to thank them, and also Jody May, Madeline Finley, who would be here except she is at home with baby Finley, who was recently born. It's a theme these days. Congratulations to her and to Commissioner O'Reilly. Not together, but Dina Shetler, Pam Magnet, Alex Johns, Brian Hurley, Pam Arluck, David Zessiger, Tom Parisi, Alex Menard, and Ryan Palmer as well. I thank them. Megan will now present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This item focuses on U.S. Telecom's request for forbearance from 6 categories of rules applicable to incumbent local exchange carriers or subcategories of incumbent local exchange carriers. The actions taken in this item promote innovation while ensuring our statutory objectives are met. Pursuant to Section 10 of the Communications Act, when the Commission considers a request for forbearance, it must determine whether each provision or rule is necessary to ensure that carriers' rates and practices are just and reasonable, whether the provision or rule is necessary to protect consumers, and whether eliminating the provision or rule serves the public interest and promotes competition. The item before you proposes granting full or partial forbearance from the majority of the categories of requirements covered by U.S. Telecom's request for forbearance, and in accordance with Section 10. Specifically, the item takes the following actions. It grants Bell Operating Companies substantial relief from Section 271 competitive checklist unbundling requirements. It grants incumbent Lex relief from equal access obligations for standalone long-distance service conditioned on preserving existing customer arrangements. It also preserves the remaining Section 272 protections. It grants relief from any future obligations to unbundle a 64 kilobits per second voice grade channel over fiber where an incumbent LEC has retired an overbuilt copper loop conditioned on preserving existing unbundled channels. It grants conditional relief from remaining computer inquiry requirements. It grants incumbent LECs relief from the obligation to provide access to newly deployed entrance conduit extending from the property line to a commercial building in greenfield builds, but denies U.S. Telecom's request for relief as it would apply to newly deployed entrance conduit for brownfields. It denies U.S. Telecom's request that price cap incumbent LECs be allowed to offer business data services, which we formerly called special access services, via contract tariff in service territories not already subject to pricing flexibility rules. It denies the requested relief from Section 214E eligible telecommunications carrier designations and obligations as they apply to price cap carriers that do not receive high-cost USF support and rejects requests for similar relief that have been made in rulemaking proceedings. As a result, at this time, incumbent price cap carriers will remain ETCs throughout their service areas unless they relinquish their designations through the Section 214E4 process, and they will continue to have a federal high-cost ETC obligation to offer voice service in the census blocks where the Commission did not already grant forbearance in December 2014. The item also declines to reinterpret Section 214E1 to conclude that ETCs are only required to meet their obligations where they receive high-cost support. In granting forbearance to the full extent supported by the record, the item also seeks to benefit consumers by relieving carriers from having to focus resources on complying with outdated legacy regulations that were based on technological and market conditions that differ from today. Instead, it allows carriers to concentrate on building out broadband and investing in modern and efficient networks and services. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. Mr. Clyburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eliminating unnecessary and obsolete obligations while preserving requirements that are essential to maintaining the integrity of those abiding principles of ensuring competition, consumer protection, universal service, and public safety, all so eloquently laid out in the Communications Act, are all sound regulatory practices. And Mr. Chair, striking that balance, as Mr. De Niro laid out, is often quite difficult. You mentioned, and I want to thank you for the 15 months of hard work that went into presenting this item this morning. And Megan, great job. Indeed, I would submit to all of you that the need for interconnected networks is as relevant today to competition as it was a century ago when AT&T agreed to the Kingsbury Commitment. While the policy and means of doing so, meaning striking this balance and competition and all of that may change. competition may not occur organically absent appropriately balanced governmental policies. In this case, I support granting relief from certain provisions that seem to outlive their purpose, including certain provisions of Section 271 that are duplicative of Section 251 and were designed to enable bail operating companies, a term that has little meaning these days, to enter the long-distance market. Similarly, the separate long-distance market has become less relevant, and it's hard to justify that retaining a requirement that incumbent carriers must enable consumers to select a separate long-distance carrier or equal access remains necessary. Evolution of the market does not always mean, however, that regulations necessary to stimulate such change should be eliminated, because doing so could undermine the very conditions that have enabled competition to flourish. While the order does a reasonable job balancing these issues, I am concerned that forbearance from certain obligations, such as access to entrance conduit in certain situations, may inadvertently curtail future competition. I would have greater comfort if the order conducted a thorough market analysis to determine the impact on competition, which confirmed that forbearance would not harm the public interest. Unfortunately, in my view, this is not the case. But I hope that my fear that once the conduit is deployed, that future competitive options may be inhibited due to the cost to competitive carriers and burdens on private entities is not realized. The notion that we should take action to reduce the cost of trenching fiber is not a novel issue. Indeed, Congress has been working on a bipartisan basis under the leadership of Representatives Walden and Eshoo on the DIG Once Broadband Deployment Bill, or the Broadband Conduit Deployment Act of 2015, to deploy conduit once rather than retrenching. While the congressional actions are for deploying along public roads rather than private property, I submit that many of the concerns and desire to reduce costs and burdens are the same regardless of where the project build is located. For these reasons, I cannot support this section of the item. While I'm grateful that the order does not forbear from entrance conduit in brownfield situations, it is just a matter of time before today's greenfield is tomorrow's brownfield. And in the future, the difference will be that competitive providers will have access to certain entrance conduits and not others. Even so, I do appreciate the effort to create a balanced approach, and that we decline to forbear in circumstances where consumers could be harmed, competition would be negatively impacted, or the public interest adversely impacted. I also have concerns about the decision outside the four corners of the forbearance petition to address other issues, including giving carriers ongoing support in areas where the Commission has not granted forbearance from eligible telecommunications carriers. For one, there is no universal service support going to some of these areas today, and I am not aware of a showing that, but for this new funding, service to these consumers is in jeopardy. But more importantly, I would prefer the Commission to focus on this funding, which is $200 million, of which $100 million is being allocated from the reserves, on connecting homes with broadbands. But I fear that this funding will continue indefinitely because there is no guarantee another provider will seek to offer service in these areas. And from where I sit, there is no plan that I see that would ensure a path for a remote areas fund. So, Mr. Chairman, if you will indulge me, for more clarity on this, I would ask Mr. De Niro some questions about these findings, if you would give me. So, Mr. De Niro, I am concerned, as I expressed, that funding to price cap carriers for voice only will be perpetual, and that we will not be able to get broadband, real broadband to these areas, which of course is our universal service goal. Can you explain to me the time frame to adopt a RAF for remote areas funds, and to ensure, hopefully ensure me and America that these areas, this will sunset?
Yes, so thank you, Commissioner, for your question. I very much appreciate it. And our goal is to get broadband to all areas. The Wireline Bureau agrees that it would be that we have a good near-term vehicle for that in the CAF2 auction order that is currently on circulation, and that would provide a good opportunity for the Commission to move forward with the RAF. Also, just as a point of procedure in terms of some late-breaking developments, what's before you right now is the memorandum opinion and order. So the funding issue is not currently before you, as I understand.
Okay.
But I think your question is still very valid in terms of what happens in these areas, what happens in terms of the RAF, because that's very important to us in terms of getting broadband out to all areas. And so I agree. Again, I think the key part in answering your question is that, in our view, the CAF2 auction order provides a good vehicle for setting forth how the Commission moves forward with the RAF.
So I'm not hearing necessarily a specific time frame, but I am hearing that we feel that we would be moving in a direction that will address the issues
Yes, that would be our recommendation, that we come up with that and describe how the Commission would move forward with the RAF in the CAF2 auction order. Obviously, that would entail some changes to the CAF2 auction order currently on circulation. Mm-hmm. But obviously, leave it up to the 5 commissioners as to how to decide that, but that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, let me pile on there for a second
if I can.
I think the issue is that we have a CAF2 order that is circulating, and that ends up becoming a predicate to the ability to move to the next phase, which is the RAF. And I would like to associate myself, as they say up there, with the gentlelady, insofar as a desire to move this with dispatch.
Well, Mr. Chairman, in light of this, I will concur on this section of the item because, again, I have faith in the team and its desire to ensure that broadband is available to all corners of America. So as a result, to wrap up, I will do something that I don't hear often. I will approve a part, concur in part, and dissent in part. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
I want to keep it simple.
Thank you. I'm keeping score here, you know.
All right. If you want to make way for the new, you need to get rid of the old. This is what we do today with the forbearance petition that is before us. Guided by the issues raised in this filing, we comb through relics in our rules and scrap policies that reflect a communications era that predates the digital age. To this end, we discard stale requirements for standalone long-distance service. We remove duplicative policies for wholesale services. And we dispense with practices that were built for narrowband rather than broadband markets. To the extent that issues raised here are the subject of broader proceedings, we commit to addressing them in other fora. We should do so expeditiously. I think this approach is modern and principled, and as a result, this decision has my support. True to my word.
I tell you, I'm keeping score on that one. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai.
I hope you're going to average me and Commissioner Rosenworcel out in terms of length of statement. All right.
Commissioner, nobody has ever accused you of being average.
Exactly. So I'll just start with the 60-page single-space statement right now. Terrific. It is an iron law of economics. You can't spend the same dollar twice. And that means that every dollar spent complying with outdated legacy regulations or maintaining creaky, aging networks is one that can't be spent deploying next-generation infrastructure, like ultra-fast fiber. New technologies, faster broadband, greater deployment, that's what American consumers want, and that's what the FCC should be aiming to deliver. And so, since my first days in this office, I have called on the FCC to remove regulatory barriers to infrastructure investment. Time and again, I've pressed the agency to eliminate unnecessary regulations, streamline compliance, and excise obligations that don't benefit consumers and only create additional paperwork for accountants and auditors. Today, we start to grant some of that relief. For example, we eliminate the long-defunct, comparably efficient interconnection requirements. We adopt a streamlined process for the elimination of the open network architecture requirements. We end the long-distance equal access and dialing parity rules, which have allowed hucksters to scam small businesses and the elderly for years. And we end the so-called checklist obligations of Section 271 that let regulatory arbitrageurs resell the services of others at regulated prices, reducing the total investment in communications infrastructure. Perhaps most importantly, we embrace the importance of next-generation technologies like fiber by ending the requirement that incumbents unbundle a 64 kilobit per second channel when they retire copper, as Ms. Capasso outlined earlier. Now, a channel that small provides a tiny fraction of the capacity of what the FCC now considers broadband to be, 0.25%, and it's rarely used in practice. In fact, the chief proponent of keeping this requirement admits never having ordered a channel. And so the obligation puts incumbents to a Hobson's choice. Either they retire the copper and buy expensive equipment to unbundle a channel that nobody will ever use, or they maintain the copper even if nobody's using it. By getting rid of this silly rule, capital once wasted on regulatory compliance will now be freed up for more fiber deployment. Now, that's not to say that I agree with every decision made here. We could have and should have gone farther in ditching outdated dictates. For example, I can't support the decision to retain Section 272E3's long-distance imputation requirement. That arcane accounting rule, just to say it suggests how arcane it is, requires companies to train specialized accountants, the costs of which are ultimately borne by consumers, even though there's no corresponding public benefit. The FCC itself targeted that particular provision as ripe for forbearance just last year. Our own staff has not found any current use of that rule. Yet we retain it because it may have once had value. That's the very definition of arbitrary and capricious. Nor can I support the unfunded mandate the order adopts for price cap carriers in remote areas. With respect to these areas, which are costly to serve, the Communications Act imposes telephone service obligations on incumbent local exchange carriers. Now, those carriers often lack the legal means to recover the resulting costs from their customers. To make up that difference, the Communications Act directs the Commission to offer those carriers, quote, sufficient universal service support. And so that raises the question, well, in this case, what is sufficient? Let's look to the Commission's own model. That model estimates that it should cost price cap carriers $1,488,789,806 and potentially more each year to serve these remote areas, and that the total expected revenue for voice and broadband service in such areas is only $393,562,260. Now, even with my social studies degree, I can figure out that leaves price cap carriers short $1.095 billion, or with less than one-third of the revenues they need to cover the cost of service in remote areas. Now, this mismatch makes obvious that the support isn't sufficient under the Act. The law cannot require companies to do X. The FCC cannot say that we will require you to do X. And the law can't also say, well, the FCC will provide sufficient support, and then the agency leave these carriers in the lurch. And this is the very kind of arbitrary and capricious Washington demand that makes Americans cynical about government and its commitment to truly universal service. So, for those reasons, I respectfully approve in part and dissent in part from today's action. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dad.
That sounds much different, I must admit. Upon courtesy of the chair and his comments earlier, I do have a longer statement and a more critical one, but I will submit it for the record and just highlight a couple points. The item has been sold in a number of settings as half a loaf, and I think that when people actually have a chance to read it, you'll find that there is less than half a loaf and less than advertised and necessary. So I would have gone much further, and I find some of the arguments against the provisions that need relief to be lacking. And this is not a complaint upon the staff, but a particular policy calls that were made. I will make two further points, and that is, I did ask and try to see how this item related to the used to petition for rulemaking on non-dominance that I've written about in a recent blog, because I see the items as directly related. In fact, it's my understanding that U.S. Telecom had considered either including it as part of this petition or filing its own petition on this point. And so I find the issues related, unfortunately, and this is no criticism of the chairman, but I think there was a disconnect in some staff, or at least not appreciated comments, because the argument had been that me raising the issue was not appreciated, and that I actually couldn't get particular answers I needed on the effect of what would be if we were to move forward on that petition from staff. So I find that discouraging and disappointing. So that's not, that's something I hope to be able to work forward as we move forward. And then I wanted to raise the last point to agree with my colleague Commissioner Clyburn on the RAF and how important it is and how we need to address that issue. It's been something I've raised and all my colleagues I think have raised it correctly, and so I committed to addressing that issue moving forward. And so if I understand it correctly, it's no longer that piece is no longer in, but if it were, I would vote no. So just to be clear on that. So I will support the majority of the item. I sent on some pieces I think we should have gone further on, and then I'll vote no on the RAF pieces if they're still relevant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. This is simple. We promote innovation, we keep up with the times, and we fulfill the statute. So, all in favor, say aye or your variations thereof. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The item is adopted. The objection, editorial privileges are granted. The objection is noted. The item is adopted. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will be presented by the International Bureau. It is entitled Comprehensive Review of Licensing and Operating Rules for Satellite Services. Mendel De La Torre, Chief of the International Bureau, will give the introduction. It's really more interesting.
Perhaps.
Oh, now that, I hope that wasn't videoed.
All right.
Ms. De La Torre.
Well, good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners, and new father. We congratulate you and your wife. It's great news. I'm pleased to be here today for the third time in 3 years as the International Bureau diligently continues to simplify, modernize, and streamline Part 25, the rules which govern licensing and operation of satellite, space, and Earth stations. Now, what a coincidence it is that today is the day before the much-anticipated release of the epic space movie that's coming along.
So there was an office pool going on as to who would mention Star Wars first. You've made somebody very rich, just so you know.
It is exactly 11:05. The Commission is considering a report and order which has the space industry sitting at the edge of their seats with what we hope is interest and enthusiasm, and we have a whole rash of people who are here sitting in their seats. A little over 2 years ago, the Commission adopted the most comprehensive review of Part 25 of the Commission's rules in more than 20 years. At that time, I noted that our work was not done. And a little over a year later, the Commission voted to approve a further notice of proposed rulemaking. That notice proposed even more changes based on recommendations from staff experts in the FCC Process Reform Report, as well as broad input from the industry. And over the past 11 months, Jose Albuquerque, the chief of the Satellite Division, and his team met weekly, scrubbing the rules and reviewing the detailed technical record to recommend changes that make sense in today's satellite market. Now, this yeoman's work led to the draft second report and order before you. In this report and order, we recommend alternatives and refinements for some of the decades-old licensing policies and rules. In fact, one tried and true policy for you movie buffs, and I'll repeat again, was first adopted around the time of the Return of the Jedi. Others were developed around the time of the Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I think I missed that one. Cumulatively, the changes in this order promote continuity of satellite services, more effectively deter spectrum warehousing, relieve burdens on the applicants, and make the United States an even more attractive choice for satellite licensing. The Bureau remains committed to examining the Part 25 rules and proposing recommendations to amend and streamline our rules and processes to better reflect technological progress. With me at the table are Jose Albuquerque, Jennifer Gilsonen, Assistant Bureau Chief at IB, and Clay DeSalle, an attorney in the Satellite Policy Branch. In addition to Jose, Jennifer, and Clay, I'd like to thank the following individuals who contributed but are not here today: Troy Tanner, Diane Garfield, Chip Fleming, Steve Duell, Carrie Murray, Jerry Duval, and Steve Spaeth. Now, Clay, whose young shoulders have borne much of the drafting responsibility, will present the item this morning. I'd like to note that this is his first time presenting to the Commission.
Welcome, Clay. May the force be with you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners, and congratulations. This second report and order recommends numerous changes to Part 25 to update and simplify our licensing of satellites and earth stations. 3 recommendations are most significant. First, the order would adopt an optional satellite licensing process to enable U.S. applicants to initiate coordination at the International Telecommunication Union, or ITU, before they file a complete license application with the Commission. Currently, a prospective operator of a geostationary satellite in the fixed satellite service must develop and publicly disclose a satellite design with much more detail than is necessary to initiate international coordination. By starting the ITU process earlier, U.S. applicants will be placed in a stronger position to negotiate with competitors who choose to file through another country. Specifically, the order would adopt a 2-step satellite licensing process. In the first step, parties submit a coordination request that will be forwarded by the Commission to the ITU, establishing an international protection date and a place in the FCC licensing queue. In the second step, parties file the remaining information required in a complete license application within 2 years of submitting the initial ITU materials. Holding a place in the queue will prevent other parties from being licensed for the same spectrum in nearby orbital locations for a period of up to 2 years, so parties would be required to file a $500,000 bond with their initial ITU materials, demonstrating their financial commitment to the proposed satellite project. Second, the order would greatly simplify the Commission's milestone policy for satellite system implementation. Under the current rules, a new satellite licensee must meet specific milestones that include demonstration of, first, signing a contract, second, completing the design of the satellite, third, constructing the satellite, and fourth, launching and operating the satellite. This milestone policy has required a licensee to submit construction contracts and technical exhibits that include confidential information and have proven burdensome to review. Therefore, the order would eliminate all interim milestones, leaving only the final milestone to launch and operate the satellite system. In addition, rather than relying on Commission review of milestone demonstrations to prove that a licensee is implementing its new satellite system, the order would adopt an escalating bond requirement. Under the escalating bond, licensees would face an increasing financial liability the longer they hold their licenses without ultimately deploying their satellite system. The bond would thus better align the licensee's own financial incentives with the public interest. That is, put the spectrum to use or surrender your license early. Third, the order would refine the 2-degree spacing policy, which was created over 30 years ago, by establishing default technical rules to ensure compatibility of satellites 2 degrees apart in the orbital arc, instead of 3 or 4 degrees apart as was common at the time. The policy was designed to enable maximum use of the geostationary arc and to promote opportunities for new entry based on the prevalent services at that time. Today, however, consumers increasingly demand satellite services to small user equipment, such as that used on vehicles in motion, that rely on different technical assumptions than were prevalent in the early 1980s. Currently, satellite operators can provide such services using higher power levels previously coordinated with any neighboring satellites. However, the deployment of a new satellite may force such operators to power down in order to comply with current 2-degree rules. Recognizing the importance of such services, the order would adopt new rules to allow previously coordinated power levels to remain unchanged. At the same time, the order would preserve opportunities for new entry by continuing to allow operation at the baseline 2-degree power levels and by updating baseline levels and extending them to additional frequency bands. Beyond these three major reforms, the order recommends many significant changes to Part 25 to make our authorization processes quicker and easier. For example, it would expand the eligibility for routine Earth station licensing, remove technology-specific limits on Earth station transmissions, expand automatic grant procedures for satellite fleet management, replace technical demonstrations with certification requirements for 2-degree satellite compatibility, forbear from requiring prior approval of certain pro forma transactions, expand the permitted space station list to additional frequency bands, open additional frequencies for use for satellite command and telemetry signals, and remove a cross-polarization requirement for satellite antennas in the fixed satellite service. To implement these reforms, the Bureau recommends adoption of this item and respectfully requests editorial privileges.
Thank you, Clay. Well done. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. There's so many references here, especially everybody's camping out and anticipating over some movie that's being released. But it's so interesting if you go back, and a lot of you have done so, and look about the creative side of the Now series and what drove and pushed the creators, particularly Mr. Lucas, after he was turned down. He wasn't embraced by the first or second studio. He didn't get the rights to Flash Gordon. A lot of things were in his way, and now we're all abuzz. And that first film, just in terms of box office history, and it's just I bring this up in this context because, again, I'm looking at a group that has been doing some incredibly hard work that people don't see and recognize. This group in the last panel, what the inputs are. They see the result or the product here, but they don't see what goes into it, and in times you have to go back to the drawing board. So, again, it's a season of thanks. But I want to thank you as I wrap up, but I just wanted to put that forth because, again, we're all excited, and it's going to break all kinds of other box office, thresholds. But a lot of work and a lot of creativity and just a lot of drive went into that and this. So I guess I'll get back on. The chairman's like, please. So I will answer. The commercial satellite industry is a sector that provides important voice, data, and entertainment services and is a driver of significant economic growth. During large-scale natural disasters, these networks play a major role in ensuring continuity of communications when wireline and wireless networks are damaged. From Hurricane Katrina in 2005 to the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, to the devastating Texas wildfires and the Japanese tsunami in 2011, to Superstorm Sandy in 2012 in the Northeast, and the 7.8 magnitude earthquake in Nepal in April of this year. Geostationary satellite operators, or GSOs, provided services that kept emergency responders, businesses, and people connected when they needed those services the most. GSOs also deliver TV and radio service to millions of consumers and provide competition to incumbent media providers. I might note that innovative non-geostationary satellite operators, or non-GSOs, plan to offer fixed satellite services which promise to soon to connect low-income communities around the globe to the internet. I'm excited about that. This $190 billion global industry, employs more than 200,000 Americans, and one of the best ways to encourage more innovation in this space is to remove outdated rules and unnecessary barriers to investment. Today's order streamlines or updates more than 200 rule provisions. We are giving GSOs the option to seek a faster way to register for International Telecommunications Union, or ITU, recognition, which is a must for a successful satellite network operation. Under our current rules, the International Bureau may not even begin the ITU registration process for a company until it submits a detailed application for the frequency band and orbital location of a proposed space station. The U.S. is the only administration in the world that imposes such a restriction. Because of this, our satellite companies find themselves at a competitive disadvantage, and foreign operators are able to secure ITU priority over American licensed companies. The process we adopt today eliminates that unfavorable distinction. Additionally, we're revising the 2-degree spacing requirements to better accommodate the use of small antennas and facilitate individualized coordination agreements between satellite companies. We are eliminating all of the space station construction milestones except for the requirement to bring them into operation at the assigned locations within a specific or a specified period of time. We are also simplifying routine Earth station licensing. With this order, the Commission is continuing its comprehensive approach to revising its Part 25 rules so that they keep pace with technological developments and spur greater investment in the commercial satellite industry. I, too, would like to thank Clay DeSalle for his excellent presentation, as well as Jose Albuquerque, Troy Tanner, Jennifer Gilson, I don't know how to say your Gilsonen. You'll accept what I say, right? All of you, the entire team, for their work on this item. Diane Cornell in your office, Mr. Chair, and of course Mendel De La Torre, the chief of the International Bureau, of course, should be commended also for their leadership in this proceeding.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
We are on a streamlining streak. The year before last, the Commission simplified and revised over 150 of its Part 25 rule provisions governing satellite services. And last year, we proposed further updates to our satellite policies, and today we put even more streamlined procedures in place. For starters, as we've heard, we eliminate interim milestone implementation requirements. We update our 2-degree spacing policy, and we also pare down and revise the application process for reserving space in the international licensing queue. Every one of these streamlining efforts matters. They can increase investment and speed deployment of satellite services, which we know are services that are responsible for vital communications worldwide. So, kudos to the International Bureau for continuing to modernize and rationalize our rules, but of course, no rest for the weary, because we will need to monitor our revised application process to ensure that it balances the timely deployment of strategic assets with the need to prevent anti-competitive warehousing. And in addition, we commit here to a future rulemaking on our new 2-degree spacing policy in order to assess its impact. So thank you to our uncommon experts on Part 25 for your streamlining efforts to date and for all the work that lies ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure none of the money in your office was on me, being the Star Wars aficionado.
How did you guess?
You'll find I'm full of surprises. 70 years ago, author Arthur C. Clarke popularized the idea of sending rocket stations, just wait, I've got some for you, rocket stations up into geostationary orbit in order to bring radio coverage to the whole world. Just 19 years later, in 1964, NASA launched the first such rocket station from Cape Canaveral, Florida, and positioned it more than 22,000 miles above the Earth's equator, near the international dateline. Now, that satellite, SYNCOM-3, was the world's first satellite in geostationary orbit. And it did what few people thought was possible back in the 1960s. It beamed the Summer Olympics from Tokyo back to the United States. And it's still around, drifting somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. Now, something else that dates back to the early 1960s has also been drifting around, the FCC's Part 25 rules governing satellite licensing and operations. When we commenced this proceeding 3 years ago, I hoped that we would comprehensively rewrite and update those rules to make the United States the most desirable country in the world for licensing and operating satellites. Now, some might have said to me that that was highly unlikely, but never tell me the odds. For the circle is now complete. We are taking action, and greater innovation in orbit is likely to be the result. Now, there are many changes to be excited about, like the new off-axis EIRP density envelopes and expanded routine emission levels for side lobes in the plane tangent to the GSO arc. But two more mundane changes are particularly important to me.
Is that the plane tangent you were talking about?
Indeed, yes, and I'm glad we were able to reach
PLAIN?
NE. Yeah. And GSO ARC, ARC. The first of the more mundane changes I'd like to highlight is something that I called upon the Commission to do a while back, which was to substantially reduce the burden of our milestone review process. Now, under that process, satellite companies have to submit to cumbersome regulatory review of their business and technical plans, and they have to meet certain construction milestones once they are granted a license. I was pleased last year when the further notice included my proposal to make all interim milestones optional and to adopt escalating bonds instead. And I'm delighted that today we go one step further and we eliminate those interim milestones entirely. This decision to replace bureaucratic micromanagement with economic incentives will simplify the application process for satellite operators, and it'll reduce the burden of oversight on Commission staff to the benefit of consumers and taxpayers alike. Second important change. I suggested last year that we streamline the licensing of small Earth stations. As proposed by the Satellite Industry Association, this change would allow a licensee to increase the number of Earth stations operating under a blanket license without prior authorization. The order does just that. And so, in English, we are ending the need for an operator to seek the government's permission before serving new customers with a new service, with an existing service. Now, credit for all of these achievements goes first and foremost to the Commission's dedicated staff. And I extend my gratitude to International Bureau Chief Mindell de la Torre, who also deserves praise for skipping Episode 2, which I don't consider part of the trilogy. Jose Albuquerque, Clay DeSalle. The force is strong with this one, Mr. Chairman. Steve Duell, the brilliant and musical Jerry Duvall, Chip Fleming, Dan Garfield, Jennifer Gilsonen, Carrie Murray, Steve Spaeth, and Troy Tanner. Thank you for your continued dedication to and public service and to helping the American public witness the power of this fully armed and operational battle station. And now, if we follow standard imperial procedure, we'll dump these rules and proceed to light speed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Hope I delivered.
Commissioner. I was actually waiting for you to talk about the changes to the orthogonal CSOC.
Well, I wanted to leave the important stuff for you to...
Leave something to talk about. Okay. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Wow. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I should start by thanking you and your team and the International Bureau led by Mindell for such great work. I want to thank you for all the edits you were willing to take on my behalf. I must admit, I did read this as I do all the items. It is a tough read. It's some very complex but very important subject matter. So I'm happy to support the item. I will highlight one issue, and you can call me Johnny OneNote if you want, but I do believe that the process for this item just reaffirmed my belief that we should make these items available when they're circulated to the commissioners, because I had and my staff had a number of ex-parte meetings where the folks from the outside had just a little bit of understanding. Some had no understanding of what was being contained within, and we would have benefited from having greater input in the front part of the process. So I'll keep working on that issue. But I want to thank the team for all of their good, hard work, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I join with all my colleagues in saying the Bureau has done an excellent job on this, making things easier and more efficient. I mean, 50 provisions of the old rules were eliminated because they don't apply anymore. 200 provisions were streamlined. And as others have said, it's one of the most comprehensive reform packages that we've seen. It means faster deployment, more innovation. It's good stuff. So Mindell, thank you. Jose, thank you. Jennifer, thank you. And Clay, great rookie performance. So with that, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The request for editorial privileges is granted with the objection noted, and the item is adopted. Don't go anywhere, Mindell. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, last on your agenda today, you will hear a presentation on the outcomes of the International Telecommunication Union's World Radio Conference that took place in November.
So, again, the privilege of the chair, Commissioner O'Reilly and I had the great privilege, but more prideful opportunity to watch this crew in action in Geneva at the WRC. And I know we will all be expressing our gratitude to you in the process. But I think that Commissioner O'Reilly and I can both agree that we were well represented. We have a good team. That the sacrifices that we watched you make 4 weeks away from home, you don't play on the weekends in Geneva. You guys keep working long hours, and thank you all for what you have done. You've done us proud. So, Mindell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this time I am here with the team from the World Radio Communications Conference, and so I have Alex Roitblatt next to me, who is the work director, Dante Ibarra, Mike Mullinex, Sankar Prasad, Carlos Flores, Larry Olson, and Alan Young, who all were with us, as you said, in Geneva. And as you mentioned, they put in extremely hard, long hours of work for the past 3 years. But during the conference, they didn't have a day off, as you said. There's many days without a break. Now, let me go to give you a little context for the ITU in case you're not familiar with it. It's the International Telecommunication Union, and they hold a World Radio Communications Conference every 3 to 4 years. The next one will be in 2019. And the WRC updates the radio regulations, which are a treaty text, and it contains anything from international table of allocations to notification procedures and other procedures relevant to international spectrum coordination. The most recent work that we were just in had over 25 agenda items to consider, and the final acts, which I have here, the provisional final acts, contain the decisions made at the conference, over 400 pages worth of decisions, and many of which read like our satellite order. So from the perspective of the FCC, we really had some concrete and real gains at the WRC. Most importantly, the Americas region made great strides in identifying spectrum for next-generation mobile communications, what we at the ITU call the International Mobile Telecommunications, or IMT. Now, this was a top priority for the FCC, and I think we really delivered on this one. The United States also achieved its goals on a number of other issues that I'll explain later in the presentation. But one important trend from this WRC is the increasing challenge of identifying global allocations. We're seeing that allocating spectrum on a regional basis may be more realistic, and in some cases, even regional allocations may be a challenge. So more allocations are being made on a so-called footnote basis, which used to be an exception. Now, inserting a footnote is the way that countries who want to diverge from the regional or global allocation in a particular band indicate that they have a different allocation from the one in the table. And a footnote can apply to one country or it can apply to many countries. Now, this rather complicated looking slide both shows the great gains that we made in our region, which is Region 2, the far left-hand column. And we ended up with much more spectrum, actually, than any other region. And the United States, and North America in particular, because of our additional footnote for UHF spectrum, will have access to more than 619 megahertz of spectrum, although we don't plan to use it all at this time. But what's important about that is that we have the flexibility to use it in the future when we want to without going back to another WRC. Now, this table also shows how fragmented spectrum allocations are, with some spectrum on a regional basis, some more on a footnote basis, but very little actual global allocation at this time. Now, in addition to the mobile spectrum, the substantial gains that we made on the mobile spectrum, the United States achieved its goals on several other agenda items, including the adoption of a regulatory framework for public protection and disaster relief applications that will pave the way for global harmonization of spectrum in the 700 to 800 megahertz range. Adoption of an allocation for short-range radars in the 78 gigahertz band, which is consistent with the FCC's proceeding on automotive radars. Allocation of spectrum to facilitate reporting the position of aircraft anywhere in the world, and this was as a result of the loss of the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. And approval of the use of fixed satellite service links for command and control of long-range unmanned aircraft systems. Now, our work was not done with the completion of the WARC 15 agenda items. At every WRC, the agenda of the next conference is set before everyone can leave. Now, there were several important items for the FCC as we crafted the WARC 19 agenda, and most critical of these issues was identifying spectrum above 6 gigahertz to be studied for 5G use. The ITU identified 11 candidate bands for study with some overlap with the FCC's Spectrum Frontiers bands. As you can see, there's an overlap of 37 to 40 gigahertz and 66 to 71 gigahertz bands. However, the ITU did not identify the 28 gigahertz band for sharing and compatibility studies, which was a priority for the FCC. Though that is a disappointment, and we believe a lost opportunity for the ITU, it will not affect the FCC's ability to study that band for use for 5G in the United States. The point is that there's already a global mobile allocation in the 28 gigahertz band, so the United States and any other country that wants to use the band for mobile services like 5G can do so. And some of us think back to the fact that there were 24 bands that were studied between WARC 12 and WARC 15, and only 4 bands were actually in the end identified in whole or in part at WARC 15. So 5G studies were not the only important issue for WARC 19 for us here at the FCC. There are several other issues that we'd like to focus on today. One is the studies related to the radio local area networks, or RLANs as they're known at the ITU, but we're more familiar with it as Wi-Fi networks, which will include 120 megahertz in the 5 gigahertz band that the United States had identified as a priority. There's also spectrum allocations for high-altitude platform systems will be looked at, and additional spectrum for the fixed satellite service. And as a follow-up to the WARC 15 global flight tracking item, there's going to be a review of the Global Aeronautical Distress and Safety System known as the GADSS. So in conclusion, again, I'd like to thank the wonderful team that we had here in Geneva on the ground, and then we also had a lot of help from home. We had Kathy O'Brien, Donna Christensen, and Julie Knapp took some of my crazed calls in the middle of the night. And special thanks go to you, Mr. Chairman, and to you, Commissioner O'Reilly, for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and be with us and give us that personal touch of being there. It really gives a lot of credibility to the delegation that we're there and that we're there for a important purpose. And so we thank you very much. It made a real difference.
Thank you, Mindell, and all of you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Members of the staff who worked so diligently before, during, and after last month's World Radio Conference should feel proud. We achieved our public safety, automotive radar, unmanned aircraft system, and global flight tracking goals, and the fact that the United States now has access to more than 619 megahertz of additional spectrum that can be used for 4G services cannot be minimized. Mendel De La Torre, Julie Knapp, Bob Nelson, Kathy O'Brien, Donna Christensen, Larry Olson, Chip Fleming, Sankar Prasad, Carlos Flores, Alex Royblatt, Dante Ibrera, Alan Young, and Michael Mullenix. We are all grateful to you, and of course the team, the two that attended the conference with you. I understand that 9 of you, I'm sure not these two, worked way past midnight on 5 different days and until 5 a.m. I know that wasn't the chair, on at least one day to ensure these results. So in addition to thanking you for this morning's presentation, allow me to once again to commend you for your dedication to public service and the important work you do here and abroad.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Am I wrong?
I think.
Am I wrong? I just want to know.
Commissioner Rosenworcel?
Yeah, thank you to the International Bureau for a terrific presentation summarizing last month's World Radio Conference. But more importantly, thank you to everyone who participated in the conference as part of the United States delegation. We're grateful for your time and effort and for your work to help revise the radio regulations of the International Telecommunications Union. So there were no shortage of signals coming out from this worldwide gathering of spectrum interests. And of course, that's because we now live in a world gone wireless. The invisible infrastructure of our airwaves powers economies, fuels innovation, and supports global security. So the outcomes from this conference matter. We should celebrate our successes, in particular the expansion of the UHF band for mobile broadband in the Americas, and the spectrum framework adopted to bolster public safety and disaster relief. Now, looking ahead, the agenda for the World Radio Conference in 2019 is already packed. That's some advanced planning. And it's going to include work on high-altitude platform stations, which I think show real promise to help bring connectivity to underserved markets nationwide. It will also include, as we've heard, the study of a wide range of bands above 6 gigahertz. Now that's terrific because our 5G wireless future requires us to break through old boundaries and explore new opportunities in millimeter wave spectrum, those airwaves that are way, way up there. And although these stratospheric frequencies have real propagation challenges, we can turn this limitation into a strength by combining these airwaves with small cells packed close together, densifying our networks at lower cost. The opportunities here are real and we should explore them. So we should join the effort, obviously, to study the millimeter wave bands identified for the conference in 2019. But at the same time, we should not be deterred by the failure to include the 28 gigahertz band in that list. We have a global primary mobile allocation in this band, and we should continue to explore this spectrum frontier right now, because the race to 5G is on, and I think the United States should lead the way. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pine.
So I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Thank you for your efforts. We are very grateful as co-workers that you represented the agency so well on these critical issues and are ushering in the next generation of spectrum policy. And we are fortunate as fellow citizens to know that you represented the United States so effectively. We look forward to seeing the fruits of your efforts develop over the next several years. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, want to extend my deepest thanks to the team for all of their hard work. And while I spent most of my time in Geneva a week that I was there with Mendel and Dante and Michael, I want to thank the entire team for all of the work behind the scenes, and I did get a chance to interact with just about at some point. I will highlight that while I was there, it rained every single day, and my understanding is since I left, the weather turned nice. But you didn't have much of an opportunity to enjoy that since you were working extremely hard on our behalf. It was a distinct honor for me to be there and to work with such professionals, so I want to thank you. I did want to ask a couple questions of Mendel, if I could. I was interested, do you agree that the work setup and some of the performances from some of the countries and other delegations was potentially problematic going forward for WARC's existence, and that the countries who are leading on 5G, including the United States, will more than likely move forward, notwithstanding what happened in Geneva in November, on things like 28 gigahertz. Would you agree with that?
Thank you, Commissioner, for your question. So on the 28 gigahertz band, I mean, as I said during the presentation, we have a global mobile allocation in that band. So part of the idea of having the ITU study it is that you can have a balanced approach to, the compatibility and sharing studies. That won't be happening at the ITU, so we'll be going ahead with our own proceeding. As a couple of you have mentioned, we have the Spectrum Frontiers proceeding, and so I think that we probably will beat the ITU before 2019 coming out with a result. Now, that may set a trend for the rest of the world, and we hope so, because many of the countries that agreed with us about studying the 28 gigahertz band are some of the leaders in 5G, and so we very much appreciate their support.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the team's work, and there were a number of bands also identified that the chairman and I are going to work on, and as an extension of our Spectrum Frontier per our previous discussion. So I thank everybody, and again, happy holidays.
Thank you very much, Commissioner O'Reilly. And I just want to second. I think both of us were proud to be known as the guys who came with this team, and we also, I think all.
They are all guys,
The guys who came with the guys, but she's not. She's not.
That's right.
So wait a minute. I said we are the guys who came with this team.
I acknowledge Mindell's work. That's all.
Hear, hear.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with that. We also want to acknowledge the work of Decker Anstrom, our ambassador, who was the leader for our nation through the whole process, and shows the patience of Job and the characteristics of a very wise man. Let me use this opportunity for a second to talk about 5G, which has really been kind of the substrata of what we've been talking about here in terms of high band spectrum. Some countries see 5G as something that will result from industrial policy. We will cooperate with them when and where it makes sense. But our policy on 5G is not to tell carriers what to do or what technology choices to make. Our policy is to move beyond studies rapidly. Our policy is to make available spectrum in a timely manner and to rely on the innovation of the carriers. We've got a small little event coming up here in March with the incentive auction, which is, not always thought of as 5G spectrum. But I thought it was interesting that the CTO of CTIA, in remarks earlier this week, said that, hey, look, the Internet of Things requires low band, mid band, and high band. And so one of the things that we will be doing in the auction that begins March 29 is making available lots of low-band spectrum with no restrictions, so that if people want to put 5G in there, that's entirely possible. We also, as Commissioner O'Reilly has noted, have an NPRM underway on high band. It is in our national interest to conclude that proceeding with dispatch. The goal that we have set internally is to conclude that proceeding this summer and, as Commissioner O'Reilly referenced, to open further spectrum proceeding. We were disappointed that at the WRC, the incumbents in both the UHF bands and the high bands, such as 28 gigahertz, prevented international studies on these bands, but it will not slow the activities of this country. And thanks to the good work of this team, spectrum is available in North America in low, mid, and high band, will be available in high band, to build out 5G and to provide national and international leadership on that technology. I go back and reiterate, this is a matter of national priority. We will see 5G tests early in the new year, with field trials to follow shortly thereafter. The way has been cleared for us to allocate high-band spectrum for that purpose. Now we have to follow through on it as a commission. And that means that we have to go back to the seemingly timeless reality that ends up being the struggle between new applications around old allocations. It's never easy, but I reiterate that this is a national priority from which we must not shirk. Again, thank you to the International Bureau, to my colleagues, to my traveling companion, Commissioner O'Reilly, and I will now not call for the vote because there's no vote to call for, but to say to you that you have a unanimous bench up here saying huzzah for the job you did. Thank you to all of you. Would any of my colleagues like to make any announcements at this time? No, I don't think so. Was he here? Can we? Yeah. Well, let's embarrass him then.
Okay, yeah, I'm for that.
Leibowitz, we're talking about you. Stand up. Commissioner, you get to lead.
Okay. Well, we decided to embarrass you a little bit this morning, so please continue standing. Okay. For more than 6 years, the gentleman standing has played an integral role in advancing the FCC spectrum management policy. He led the team that crafted the spectrum recommendations in a national broadband plan that included greater transparency of spectrum use, the world's first ever reverse auction of broadcast TV spectrum, and allocating more spectrum for unlicensed services. And as acting chair, I had a front row seat in watching how John and his team successfully negotiated the repurposing of several bands from federal agencies to commercial use for the AWS-3 auction. But probably the most significant legacy that you will leave is your mentorship to all of us, but specifically more than 100 Wireless Bureau staff members. So while I could embarrass you more, I will not. What I will do is thank you and wish you all the best.
Congratulations, John, on moving forward. We are going to miss you here immensely. You have been an uncommon enthusiast for spectrum, a reliable debater when it comes to how we're going to move forward with ideas for wireless policy. And while we appreciate all your work here, I think we should also mention that you were the dynamo who represented this agency so well on the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology for their 2012 Big Think report on the future of spectrum policy and the power of sharing in the future of spectrum policy. So thank you for that as well.
Mr. Pai.
I want to echo what my colleagues have said, and I simply want to make clear for the public record that this is not the only transition you are making. As you pointed out in your farewell email, you are now the owner of a minivan. So having sacrificed some of your cool cred, like so many of the rest of us now, I hope... Yeah, indeed it is. But no, you've been a fantastic a public servant and a good friend to so many of us at the Commission. We wish you well in your future endeavors. And I have a few other brief announcements, if you wouldn't mind. Perhaps it's just the end of the year, but we are seeing a number of departures from the agency, and I just thought I'd note some of them, starting with Nancy Vu, who is in financial operations in the travel and operations group. Very appreciated part of the commission, but it's so crucial for so many of us to get our jobs done. Now, Nancy said, and I'm quoting here, that she wanted no, with bolded, capital letters, and underlined, no celebration, party, fuss, kerfuffle, or brouhaha. I hope I haven't run afoul of that request by making this statement. Second, Tom Beers, who was formerly the chief of the policy division, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, spent 35 years as a lawyer, 27 of those years in service to the FCC. I got to know him pretty well because we used to ride together on the Metro from Arlington into the commission when I was in OGC. Just a wonderful human being with a wide range of interests, and his departure is much lamented in these quarters. Carlin Walker, the chief of the Printing and Graphics Center. He spent 43 years at the FCC. I came to know him when I had the misfortune in 2008 of handling the FCC's response to a, shall we say, plenary oversight request that required the generation of a great deal of paper. And so I got to know him very well. Just another wonderful person, and he leaves some big shoes to fill. He said in his farewell email, I think he's got a very busy agenda, Carlin will play golf in Arizona. In addition, during his spare time, Carlin will spend several hours per day playing golf. And to help balance his time during his downtime, Carlin will play golf most days. 4. Next, Nancy Brooks. She spent 44 years at the FCC. 44 years. That's just incredible. And she will be missed as well. So will Val Brock, who spent 38 years in service to the FCC in the Wireline Competition Bureau. I'm just amazed at the dedication of these public servants. And last but certainly not least, someone who's very close and personal to me, Deborah Weiner in OGC. I don't know if any of you ever had the chance to work with Deborah, but if you did, you would know that she exhibits, as I know Jonathan knows, just a wonderful range of talents, a deep knowledge of some of the most challenging areas of law, fiscal law and appropriations, what Congress meant when it said something that was an appropriationese that binds the agency. She helped us navigate through those thickets, and she did it with just a wonderful sense of humor, often a wry smile. And Deborah's just a fantastic person, and I do hope she stays in touch with those of us. While she travels, her husband, who spent many years in service to the Congress, and she are going to be traveling quite a bit, I would expect, and I'll certainly be living vicariously through them. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the indulgence.
Commissioner. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you. I too want to extend my thanks for all of the public servants that Commissioner Pai mentioned. Certainly John Leibowitz. We didn't have as much opportunity, given my limited time here, to interact, but I always appreciate strong intellectual challenging conversations. We didn't always agree on everything, but we did have a lot of interaction, and we did appreciate that part of it. And I want to thank anyone who worked for the FCC and has now gone on to a different path in their career. It is we have such few moments in life, and you hope that you enjoy them. The people here that you interacted with will miss you, but hopefully you'll enjoy not being here on a daily basis. So thank you very much.
Okay.
A friendly amendment. I'm not sure if I heard because the lists are getting so long, but there are two. We are. It's going to be tough to say goodbye to Wanda Sims. I don't know if you mentioned her. She spent a lot of years here, and but for Wanda, all of this would not be possible. And Francis Penn, I believe, is going to hang out in our home state of South Carolina. So wanted to add those two. I am not sure, and I know the list is not exhaustive, and just wanted to affirm that. And I just have to just pick on him one more time. The new proud father. When I looked at the email, it was so typical O'Reilly saying, "Pardon the interruption." There's just so much. If you know anything about them, it didn't even surprise me that he would put that there. Absolutely no interruption to introduce us to your beautiful little princess. So again, once again, congratulations.
Yeah, boy, this is, the next meeting he's going to be falling asleep. So I want to associate myself, obviously, with all of these comments. And, one of the things that surprised me when I came to the commission was the discovery of how many people had been here for so long. The 20 and 30 and 38 and 40 years, is not unusual.
The ones that have been here 40 years look great.
There's a secret in the water here. But in particular, John Leibovitz, you all saw him as the Deputy Bureau Chief in the Wireless Bureau. I also had the great privilege of being able to have him as my special advisor on wireless issues and to be able to turn to him and say, John, what do I think? And his counsel was always sage, terse, and understandable. So, John, you got an awful lot of fans and an awful lot of people who are incredibly grateful to you and all that you have done. You leave a mark in so many different ways. And we look forward to seeing what happens next, because I got a feeling this isn't the last we hear of Leibovitz. But thank you, John. Madam Secretary, you want to tell us what happens next?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, January 28th, 2016.
And until then, we stand adjourned. But first, everybody have great holidays.
We're going to go ahead and get started with the press conference. Perfect amount of seats for everybody today. Oh, we got a straggler over there. Did you have? Okay, all right. All right, I'll turn it over to Chairman Wheeler, and then we'll get started with your questions.
Thank you, Kim. And again, happy holidays to everybody. I know that you're all, we had enough Star Wars references today, so I'll try not to double down on that. But I will try and make things short. This was the last meeting of the year, as you know. We adopted 2 more items that'll streamline our processes, update outdated rules, and generally improve the way we do business. But rather than talk about these items individually, I'd like to make a general point, and that was that they fit into the kind of thing that we've been talking about since day one of my chairmanship, when we set out a clear set of goals that we would use all the tools at our disposal to spur innovation, investment, and facilitate faster and better networks, that we would safeguard and nurture the enduring values that we called the Network Compact, and that we would modernize and improve the agency's operation. And this, just what we did today, fits in with that. I'm proud of this agency. I'm proud of what we accomplished. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is how often you hear up here on the dais, the dais, whatever it is, the comments from the commissioners about compliments to the staff and their pride in the work of the staff. And we've got to make sure that we never lose sight of that. So on that note, be happy to discuss anything that you want to discuss. Let's start with Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Kirby with TR Daily. Thanks for the moratorium on additional Star Wars references.
Are you going to go tonight?
Huh?
Are you going to go tonight?
I'm going on, taking my kid out of school on Monday, and we're going. So that's the priority.
Really?
Yeah.
That's bold.
Even though it's PG-13 and he's 8, I'm a good parent.
Okay, thank you for that question. That's a really good question, Paul.
There seems to be a growing trend for zero rating by wireless carriers. Sure.
I joked up thinking about your question. Go ahead.
Yeah. There seems to be a growing trend for zero rating by wireless carriers, and you mentioned after the last meeting about the T-Mobile service that you would keep an eye on it. Are you seeing anything that makes you think in the industry that the FCC needs to intervene or clarify its position?
Well, I mean, as you appropriately point out, Paul, excuse me, at the last meeting, I was asked about T-Mobile's binge on, and I said that I thought that it was innovative, it was competitive, and we would be monitoring it and keeping an eye on it. I mean, I think that's That's the way in which we've tried to lay out that we're going to operate under the open internet rules. And so as a part of that, yesterday we sent letters to T-Mobile and Comcast and AT&T asking them to come in and have a discussion with us about some of the innovative things that they are doing. Now, let me be real clear. These were, let's get informed. This is not an investigation. This is not any enforcement. This is help us stay informed as to what the practices are, as we said we would do in the open internet order. Yes, sir.
Can I follow up on these letters? So are you talking about, can you give us a little more detail about what innovative practice you're talking about? Is it beyond just the zero issue in terms of some data?
So I mean, we want to talk about multiple things, and we want to hear what they want to talk about. Okay, but I mean, so Comcast has their stream proposal, T-Mobile has their binge on, AT&T has their subsidized data plan, and sponsored data. Sorry, wrong term. Has a sponsored data plan, and again, I want to, we made a big deal at the Open Internet that we wanted to welcome innovation, that we wanted to see that new and innovative ideas increased competition, but that we also wanted to keep aware of what was going on, and that's what we're doing. John?
Thanks for all that. Give me 1 second, sorry.
Want me to come back to you?
No, that's okay. I guess I'd like to follow up on this too. So it seems like there are three buckets of things that these companies are offering that we've just been talking about. Mm-hmm. So there's zero rating, there's sponsored data, and then Comcast has a product that it describes as, IP cable, which it says is not actually covered by the rules. Do you see those as three distinct buckets, and can you talk about how you would view them just from a legal or regulatory standpoint?
We're not bucket counting, and again, I go back that what we said in the open internet is that we would observe and keep ourselves educated, and that's what we're doing.
Thanks.
Amir Nasser, Morning Consult. I was just wondering, regarding Lifeline modernization, if you could give an update as to when you think we can expect a rulemaking, and just what recommendations the Commission has noticed as most popular.
Sure. I hope we're doing this early in the new year, and Commissioner Clyburn and I are working closely together on that, and I'm not ready to talk about the specifics of it at this point.
Yeah. In a discussion on the U.S. Telecom forbearance petition, Commissioner Clyburn mentioned there was $200 million, including $100 million from a reserve fund. She had some concern about, seemed to be going towards voice, and she's wanting to know when you're going to do more to promote broadband in certain areas. And then Matt Del Nero said, well, the funding in late-breaking development, I believe he said, was taken out. And then there was some discussion about the CAF2 auction order. He said that might be a good vehicle for dealing with remote area fund. And you said CAF2 was the predicate for remote area fund. And then Commissioner Pai talked something about an unfunded mandate of $1 billion. Now, there was a lot there. Can you sort this out for us and tell us what is in or not in the order regarding the funding, and then what your intentions are regarding...
There's nothing in the order about money.
So was it taken out? It was $200 million?
It was taken out.
And what was it going to do?
There was to be some money for paying for some of these things for voice, and it was taken out because there was insufficient support on the commission, and we have a collegial back and forth process. But I think everybody, the fitting, all your other components together, I think everybody believes that we want to make sure that we are addressing how we expand broadband. And so CAF, RAF, and all the other AFs that are associated with that. I mean, what I was trying to say, we'll be proceeding with dispatch because this is an important thing. We got to make sure that people have the ability to connect.
But were you just to nail it down? You said CAF was a predicate for RAF. Are you suggesting you would do the CAF reverse auction first?
No, I wasn't saying we do the CAF. What I was saying, there's a CAF item on the floor.
Right.
What I was really saying is, hey guys, let's vote on the CAF item.
And is the RAF part of that?
No.
Okay. And that would be the next step.
But they're exactly.
Okay. All right.
Alex.
Hey, Alex Byers with Politico. You told lawmakers last month, you at least made it clear that you were not about to move anything with regard to your MVPD definition proceeding. That obviously came after several parts of the internet and content industry expressed concern about the proposal. Understanding sort of what your underlying goal was to spur innovation in that industry, and setting aside perhaps the particulars of what you may or may not have been proposing, to what extent are you kind of thinking about going back to the drawing board on that to do something that people will be more happy with, or is it just like we're setting that aside, focusing on other stuff?
Yeah, no, thanks, Alex. I think the word I used was we hit pause.
Right.
I thought that was kind of appropriate. Sure. You hit the pause button.
But that implies we're going to come back to this.
So we hit pause. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because the NPRM is a process that is designed to produce information that you didn't have on the other side of the NPRM. And so that gave us cause to hit pause. We have several things that will be coming out in the course of the year that will be dealing with video issues. Not the least of which is that Congress is asking us to look at the reasonableness of agreements on local rights and this sort of thing, which will be, I think, an opportunity to address writ large some other issues that have been hanging around as well. Whether the MVPD issue gets rolled up in that, I don't know. But there are so many innovative things going on right now in the video space, and we want to let them continue to innovate. Dave.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering what you think of the funding provisions directed at the FCC that are in the omnibus package that's going to go to the floor tomorrow.
Congress was particularly wise.
Is there anything you saw in there that concerns you, things that are absent that you would have liked to have seen?
Well, sure, we'd asked for more money.
For a particular purpose?
And had identified what we'd be using it for. I think that the fact that the Congress is at least keeping us at current funding levels is a vast improvement over where we were when we came out of the appropriations committees.
Lydia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To return to those letters you sent, did you set a time frame for holding those talks in them, or was it open-ended?
No, there is not a be here Tuesday, if that's the question you're asking. No, and we're going into the holidays, and so that's going to obviously have an impact. But we asked that we come in. And again, I want to go back to, we want to know what they're thinking and they're hearing as well. This is, okay, let's come in. It's now been 6 months since the Open Internet Order went into effect. And there have been lots of innovations. And there are lots of innovations that undoubtedly are still under the hood or under the covers or not brought out yet that people are thinking about. And so our thing was, let's just make sure that we are informed as to what is going on in all of these areas and anything that they want to talk about.
Thanks. Alicia Green, CQ Roll Call. You extended for 1 year the exemption on disclosure requirements for small broadband providers, but some have argued that should be permanent. Is that something you're willing to consider based on what comes out of the PRA assessment?
Well, you just said the key is, let's base it on facts rather than supposition. So let's see what we get in terms of the data. Monty.
Chairman Wheeler, Monty Taylor, Com Daily. Commissioner Rosenworcel said that the Federal State Joint Board is holding off on making recommendations regarding USF contribution reform due to the open internet litigation. Is there anything else the FCC is holding off on pending some sort of initial ruling from the court?
I didn't realize that she had said that.
That's what Dave told me.
Well, hey, so she is the chairman of the joint board, and that's a process that she's leading.
So yeah, but is there anything that the FCC otherwise is holding off on because of that litigation?
Let me understand. So are you saying we're sitting here saying we're not doing things
right, because you're waiting for the court to
decision?
Opine on something? Yeah.
No, we think that we're on strong grounds in the court, and I thought that John Sallet and Jake Lewis did exemplary jobs. I was not in the courtroom. I listened to the entire proceeding on the audio, was impressed with the job that they did, and am confident that the open internet rules have a good future ahead of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have great holidays.
Okay, we'll begin the Bureau press conference. So first, the Wireline Bureau. Are there questions on the Wireline Bureau on the U.S. Telecom item?
Participating at all? Was hoping to ask about the LPTV thing that got passed right before the meeting.
Okay, we'll have to. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if they're
No
here,
problem.
but anybody on U.S. Telecom? Or are you all set with that?
WRC presentation question.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, we'll
let go.
We'll move
Chairman
on.
basically answered, I think.
Okay. All right. So the next item was the satellite services. So International Bureau. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is more for like the chairman will need.
Yeah, I've got one.
Is he waiting
We're
for
waiting for the
Oh,
International
sorry.
Bureau to come
I
up.
gave you wrong thing. But in this one, you can ask more than one question. The chairman is like, yeah, the chairman's one. These guys.
Okay. Who has? What was your question, Alex?
I know that obviously some of the folks up here were also working on the.
Yeah,
I had a question about
you're
the-
moving to. Okay, you were moving to the WRC item.
Sure. This
okay,
is
so
maybe
we can take both of those now, right? Is it the same
Sure.
team?
This is maybe
Yeah.
a question that other people know the answer to, but I'm a noob, so I'm going to ask it anyways.
Okay.
What is the process? Like, obviously, we talked a lot about international allocations made for various things via the WRC. What is sort of next, if anything, in terms of how the FCC needs to then act to make some of those allocations a reality in the marketplace. Specifically, I'm just personally interested in the global flight tracking component. Is it sort of, all right, we decided this is the spectrum we're going to use for this purpose, everybody go build your flight tracking systems, or are there more regulatory things that need to happen either at the FCC or in other jurisdictions across the globe for that to become a real thing?
Okay, so I think that's an excellent question. So a decision that's made at the ITU at a WRC is part of a treaty. Mm-hmm. So unless you take an exception, then you are expected to implement it domestically. Now, sometimes you have a choice. So you'll have an allocation that may be a mobile, a fixed, and a satellite allocation. Mm-hmm. And your country can decide how you want to implement that domestically. Now, for the global flight tracking, what we would do is if that is a band that is an FCC band, then the FCC would undertake a notice of proposed rulemaking, and we would implement it that way. If it's a band that is an NTIA or a federal band, then they would actually undertake to do the rules and develop the rules for that.
So someone, whether it be FCC or NTIA, will be putting forth something in the near or farther near future to further that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the FAA will then
do we know,
be
like, roughly, is that
it.
going to happen in like a month, a year? Is there a deadline for when you have to do something with it?
No.
Okay.
There isn't usually a deadline. Sometimes there is, but I don't think for the global flight tracking there's a deadline.
Okay.
I'll look to the back to see if one of those guys actually, is there a deadline? No, I don't think there's a deadline.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Jake? The chairman said that the commissioners were disappointed that at the WRC, I think he said some incumbents prevented international studies on certain bands. Could you just make sure I understand that, explain which bands he's talking about?
Okay. I think what he was talking about was one of the bands that the United States had put in its original proposal that went in through the CTEL, which is the Inter-American group, was the 28 gigahertz band, which is, as you know, one of the bands that is a Spectrum Frontiers band. That band has a lot of satellite use around the world, or development of satellite, and so we've actually taken that into consideration in our Spectrum Frontiers proceeding, and are looking at ways of sharing that band between mobile services and the satellite. But other countries did not even want to study it, and I think that we were disappointed that they wouldn't even study it at the ITU. It wasn't going to be identified, it would just be a study to then perhaps be on a list to be identified. So the fact that you couldn't even study it was, I think, a big disappointment. But as I mentioned, there is already a mobile allocation, so we can actually continue on with our process, and we don't have to go through an allocation process. We don't have to change the allocation table here in the United States because we already have a mobile allocation.
Paul Kirby with TR Daily. So is a U.S. priority and a goal to get lower UHF global harmonization. And as you mentioned in your presentation, there are some footnotes in Region 1 and one of the other regions. But then afterwards, Decker and others said, well, we got everything we wanted from the work. But that was a goal. So is it disappointing that there was not more support, particularly in one region that basically said, forget it? And then secondly, are you going to put your presentation on the website today?
Sure, we will put I'll start with the last question. Yes, we'll put the presentation on the website, no problem. From the perspective of having a global allocation for mobile in the UHF band from 470 to 698, we knew that was going to be a very tough row to hoe going into the conference. We're one of the more advanced countries, or dealing with those bands. We're one of the very first countries that is looking at doing anything licensing for mobile in that sort of 470 to 698 band with our incentive auction in the spring and in March of next year. So we had, so with us, it was something that we needed to do. We already had an allocation. We had a footnote where the United States showed up. And so what we ended up accomplishing was we kept that footnote the same and other countries joined onto it, but we also ended up with an identification for IMT. So it's specifically, even more indicated that was what we're doing. Now, from the perspective of getting a global allocation, back in WARC 2007, I know that's a while ago, but at WARC 2007, we started that same process. We were one of the very first regions to get a regional allocation for mobile in the 700 megahertz band. The Europeans and the folks in Region 1 went ahead and did that at this particular conference. So Europe, Africa, the RCC, so the Russian group, as well as the Arab group, they adopted the 700 megahertz band at this particular conference. So they're running a little bit behind where we are. So I think in some ways we're a trendsetter from in that respect. And as I explained in the presentation, it's a little bit down in the weeds, but you start with things, I think, now through a footnote, then you can hopefully go on to a regional and then to a global allocation. So it's sort of like baby steps.
And as Decker has pointed out, it's similar to the C-band, where it's taken some years for the various regions to catch up, if you will, since 2007.
That's exactly what happened with the C-band, where you ended up with countries on a footnote first, and then the Europeans flipped that footnote into a regional allocation at this particular conference. So before you had to have your name in a footnote, now it's just a regional allocation.
Thank you.
Any more for the International Bureau?
Question.
Okay. Could you identify yourself?
Sure. Matt Danneman with Communications Daily. In the docket for the Part 25 rules, the most heavily lobbied sort of activity was around the 2-degree rule changes. I'm wondering if you could speak to how, the discourse that was going on there informed what was ultimately decided upon today. There was obviously a lot of disagreement between much of the industry and one particular part.
Yes, I think the two let's say, opposing views about Part 25. On one extreme was a suggestion to completely eliminate the 2-degree rules, and on the other extreme was a proposal to pretty much keep 2-degree rules as they are today. I think what is in the rules is a middle ground in which we keep the 2-degree rules, but we introduce provisions that we allow existing service that might have to be interrupted if a new satellite came nearby to maintain their levels of operation and be able to coordinate with this incoming new service in a better way. It's a very, let's say, it's trying to strike a balance between the two extreme views that were, but I'm not sure whether both sides will be equally dissatisfied or someone will be happier than the other. But that's basically what it is, if I answer your question. It's a complicated issue to explain, but basically, let me try to explain better. What happens is that the current rules, someone could get to a certain orbital location and start transmitting higher power than the 2-degree rules because there was no one nearby. And then he starts providing service to small antennas, and everything is nice. If someone comes at 2-degree from him, the current rules would force this guy to power down and therefore probably not be able to continue with service. So what we did was, if someone comes here, this guy that is already there doesn't have to power down. But this guy can operate at 2-degree levels. So that may not solve the problem between the two, but will encourage them to discuss and try to resolve the situation in a way that will allow the continuity of this existing service. That's the as simple as I can make.
Any other questions? Okay, that ends this portion. I think we have Commissioners Pai and O'Reilly.
Commissioner Pai will have a brief opening statement.
Hello. I just want to start with a few brief remarks. What a difference a month makes. Last month, we were told that T-Mobile's Binge On was innovative and competitive, and that the agency had essentially blessed that service. 1 month later, fast forward, and the agency is now investigating not just T-Mobile, but also AT&T and Comcast for services that they are trying to provide to their consumers. And make no mistake, this is an investigation. When you propose to offer a service and the agency says, we'd like you to visit Southwest Washington, D.C. and explain what those services are about, this is not simply a benign informational inquiry. The agency is obviously trying to gather facts to determine whether or not those services comport with the net neutrality regulations that the majority adopted this past February. And so I am deeply disappointed in the substance of these investigations. I'm also disappointed in the process. Commissioner O'Reilly can speak for himself, but for me, we weren't given notice of these letters, that the letters are being sent out until yesterday evening. We still haven't actually seen the letters. And I think that if the agency is purporting to speak for all commissioners, that all commissioners should be apprised of what is in the inquiries that it's sending out to private sector entities. So with that, unless Commissioner O'Reilly has something,
Well, I would just join your last point, is certainly, and your other points as well, but certainly the last point, I just learned of the letters at the chairman's press conference. There may have been a voicemail that we may have missed, but we're not aware of it. So not only do I not had no heads up, but no text at all. So I'm kind of flabbergasted by that process. There are, give or take 1,500 people here. I got to believe somebody could have sent us over the letters. I'm just struck.
Okay, Monty, start with you.
Oh, I have a bone to pick with you, sir. Oh, I'm very excited. You guys voted an LPTV item right before the meeting again, and I was wondering if you had any comment on how that turned out, either of you, and if you could tell me what is in it, since we have not had anything.
You'll see what is in it soon enough. I'll just simply say that negotiations from our end were productive, and we were able to reach a consensus, and I'm glad we were able to vote it before the meeting. But stay tuned. You'll see it very soon, I would expect.
I can just say, just for my own, I did support it. I think it provides some clarifications and some helpful steps. We'll have to see, how the response is once it's released.
Oh, and just to be clear, my bone to pick with you was about your tweet about episode 2, which I do think in some ways is much worse than episode 1.
You're very wrong.
I know it contains a single worst scene I think that was in any of the Star Wars, but don't make me pull out my lightsaber.
You asked a question. TR Daily spawned like a 2-hour Civil War lecture like 2 meetings ago. So reap what you sow.
All right. I believe the statement is next question.
David?
I'm wondering if you don't think what the chairman's office has done with T-Mobile and AT&T and Comcast is appropriate here, is there any appropriate way to monitor these new services and assess this trend?
That presupposes that the need for monitoring is there in the first place, and that's part of the point that I made and Commissioner O'Reilly made when we adopted these net neutrality regulations, that this entire regulatory enterprise is a solution that won't work in search of a problem that doesn't exist. The fact that these companies are experimenting with different business models in a very dynamic marketplace with a great infusion of competition suggests that there isn't a place for the FCC to haul in companies left and right, with the exception of certain politically favored companies, and say, well, we want you to justify your business plans to us. Obviously, the facade is going to be, well, it's just an informational, fact-gathering inquiry, but I think we all know where the end of that road lies. And I would much rather, if an anti-competitive problem presents itself that is somebody alleges is a violation of our rules, and that's one thing. But for the agency just to engage in fishing expeditions with all these companies is something that's going to tie up a lot of staff resources and ultimately not benefit the American consumer.
Well, I would add to this, if it's not an investigation, then the company should feel free to say, well, we'd rather not come in. We're not interested in coming in. Thanks anyway. It's, holiday season. We got other things to do. But imagine what will happen. So, I mean, that doesn't seem like a likely outcome, right? The commission is mandating that they come in and explain themselves, and then anything else they'd like to talk about, as I think the chairman said. That's extremely troubling, especially, as my colleague highlighted, after last month, where it seemed to be, I said before you all, I thought we were getting a green light for some of these innovative services, and now we're getting the back end of we're going to do it. We're going to look at these innovative services as excruciatingly painful as possible, because we're starting to hear from a select group of complainers.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, not to belabor the point, but to go on what David was talking about here. I mean, look at it from the flip side. What if the FCC said, we are not going to pay attention at all to these new innovative offerings that companies under our jurisdiction are making? Wouldn't that be, someone could argue then that that's, dereliction of the FCC's duty to be aware of what's going on in the mobile marketplace? I mean, surely there's got to be some way for the agency to now, we haven't seen the letter, so I have no idea if it's really just like a nice letter or if it's like, it looks like an investigation without calling an investigation. But it just seems like reasonably there would be some way for them to be paying attention and learning about these new programs. For example, some people debate whether the Comcast service is really IP cable or just sort of a way to get around net neutrality rules. I don't know the answer to that, but it seems like regulators would want to know. So isn't there some way to sort of study this without being, a big bad government? Or is it just like that's, I don't know. Yeah.
So two responses. First, there are many ways for a commissioner or for a commission staff to apprise themselves of the facts of a particular service, short of sending on letterhead a voluntary request for companies to come in. I meet with plenty of people every single day who describe some of the new services and products that they would like to roll out. I get all the facts I need, short of sending them a letter saying the FCC would like you to come explain yourselves. Secondly, I think part of the problem here is that this entire inquiry comes in a very, frankly, politicized context where the agency has been beaten up by certain so-called consumer advocates for not being tough enough on some of these innovative new services, some of which are deemed now human rights violations. And I think in that context, it's not simply a question of the agency asking people to come in and explain facts. There's going to be tremendous political pressure put on the agency to do something once it is apprised itself of what those facts are. And I think that is part of the problem as well, is that we can't be sure anymore of what the regulatory lay of the land is. It's very ad hoc, and it's driven by extraneous interests.
I think the way you phrased the question is well put. Neither of us know what was in these letters. That should scream the process is a problem. And if the process is starting from that point, you can only imagine where what the actual work is going to involve. I think my colleague hits it right on the head. We can certainly we want to learn as much as possible. You can have those conversations. We have ex partes all the time. Companies do come in. We don't send them, a letter to say, please come in, you're expected to explain yourself. But I have no idea what the text is. It's just as problematic. But to your larger question, do I want to be continually informed? Yes. And instead of doing the NPRM that we did the rules we did in February, many of us suggested you should have started with an NOI. You could continue to learn under an NOI, and people can continue to file things, and you can, go through that process and continue to understand what's happening in the marketplace, separate from we're going to have. I actually don't know who, based on the chairman's comments, I don't know who's going to lead this, investigate. Is it the Enforcement Bureau that's doing this new conversation with these companies, or who?
He did say he said at one point it's not enforcement. I don't know if that means that it's.
He didn't say Bureau.
Right. He just said it's not.
Right. I think you're saying it's not enforcement, but it doesn't mean it's not. Those. I don't honestly know. That's extremely troubling.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you a break from that. Just one follow-up on the U.S. Telecom forbearance. And Commissioner Pai, you expressed concern about an unfunded mandate regarding the price cap carriers, and you mentioned the cost model saying it's going to cost $1.5 billion to serve these remote areas, but there's only like 360 some, whatever the figure was, million from the voice and broadband revenues, and that's a big delta. But isn't that the whole purpose of having the CAF reverse auction is to see who's willing to come in and bid on those subsidies to make up that difference. What's your real concern there? I don't really understand it.
My real concern is that we didn't address that question in this particular item. The FCC requires certain carriers to have an obligation to provide service. The law says that the FCC then has to make sure that universal service support is sufficient for meeting those obligations. The FCC's own model says that the expected cost is going to be basically around $1.5 billion. The FCC's model says the expected revenues are only going to be $363, I believe it is, million dollars. These are indisputable facts, what I've just laid out. And so it seems to me that the FCC not having filled that gap is simply a violation of our statutory duty, not to mention fairness, economics, common sense, et cetera. That's why the very least we could do, I think, is to live up to that obligation. And the fact that we punted it to another proceeding, I mean, obviously better solved later than never, but nonetheless, we had a chance to do it here.
Okay, but so just to be clear, that $1.5 billion is to provide broadband service, isn't it? Whereas aren't what you referring to isn't it the voice service that's the traditional obligation?
Perhaps, but the basic point is the government cannot require you to do something, and the law cannot say the government will compensate you to some extent for the cost of doing something, and then just leave you in the lurch. You essentially have the obligation, but you don't have. So
in other words, you would have provided the funding? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I simply would have said what I said.
Or gotten rid of the obligation.
Right. What I would have said, what I said internally was that what was originally on the table was a very, very tiny fraction of that amount, and that fraction was insufficient. It didn't meet the statutory obligation. Well, what was on the table was less than that.
Okay.
Before it was scrapped at the last minute.
All right.
Can I just follow up and answer your question this way? I want to see the Commission move forward, as my colleagues, I think a number of us mentioned, on the RAF, and have pushed for that since pretty much the day I got here. That, if addressed properly, which is the offering of broadband services, would reduce the need for some type of funding going for voice-only services for companies that actually want to exit the marketplace. So I think that's the better outcome. I think we got somewhat commitment that we're going to do this as part of the CAF auction, but then it seemed to kind of be unclear going, I don't know what to take from that. So I'm more troubled, but I want to proceed. I've obviously had my views on the CAF auction, past the CAF post-Rofer auction, and have articulated those already.
Yeah. Hi, John McKinnon from the Wall Street Journal. Going back to the zero, for lack of a better term, the zero rating issue, do you think it's obvious that the rules allow for all of these practices that are emerging?
Well, I think the FCC leadership put it best when we adopted the rules. We don't know where things go next, and that is coming to roost here, that we simply don't know whether the agency will find that these particular services violate those rules. And I think if you look at the text of the Internet Conduct Standard, the description of it, it's very wide-ranging, 7 non-exhaustive factors that are going to be considered. How that standard is going to be applied is very unclear, and I think that's part of the reason why the Electronic Frontier Foundation's warning on or around February 26th is now proving to be prescient, that this could end up being applied in ways that are going to disincentivize innovation and investment in next-generation online services. And I'm sorry to say the EFF was right.
I honestly have no idea, and I think that's the most difficulty. We talked about this in February in terms of the uncertainty. So, a provider would like to offer this. They don't know whether it meets or will not violate one of the rules, and therefore, they're looking for the government to provide. And what we articulated, I think, at the time was the government's going to have to provide some type of approval, and whether it be a mother may I circumstance. In the last meeting press conference, the chairman indicated that's not the case. But here it seems like we're now getting to hey, tell us what you're doing, and then we can give more blessing. It's just mind-boggling that we told them this is exactly what's going to happen, and it seems to be playing out that way.
Thank you.
Sir, next question.
Well, just so you guys haven't seen the letter. You have not seen the letter, is that right? So they don't have to share it with you, or?
Well, common courtesy, they should. On common courtesy and my understanding of practices, they would send it to us. I'm just kind of not understanding that I have it, so I just don't get it.
So, just to clarify one thing, Commissioner Pai, in talking about the forbearance item and the funding being reduced and then scrapped, is that your tweeting demon, Chief of Staff Matthew, talked about people are talking about an item at this meeting that they've never even looked at, that final item. Is that what he was talking about, that the funding had been taken out and people didn't know how much?
Yes.
Okay, and then one other thing, the small business exemption item, which was released in the last day or two, again, there were concerns expressed by Matthew in a tweet form about changes to that item, which folks had not seen. I wanted to see if you could elaborate.
Sure. So there, too, there was a process problem. We only got very belated notice of it, I think something like 9 minutes before it actually went out, as opposed to 48 hours. But more importantly, in terms of substance, my concern was that we didn't take with the decision that the facts and the law would clearly suggest was warranted. Literally every single comment and every reply comment on this issue suggested that these so-called enhanced disclosure obligations would be burdensome as applied to smaller broadband providers and didn't provide any bang for the buck with respect to consumer protection. Nonetheless, the agency simply kicked the can down the road until December 2016, 1 year from now. And so my position is pretty clear. We don't need to wait for the Office of Management and Budget process to play itself out. We have the facts that we need. We've previously found that these obligations are imposing a burden. And we've heard from virtually every segment of the industry, from the small mom-and-pop WISPs to the smaller rural cable operators to the rural telephone carriers, who've told us that these obligations are unnecessary. There's literally no countervailing evidence in the record from their comments or the reply comments to justify a contrary conclusion. And so I think Commissioner O'Reilly put it well. We should have done what was obvious now as opposed to just waiting for a year.
Okay, and then Commissioner O'Reilly, in the satellite item today, you mentioned process, and of course you've proposed that the commission circulate an item when it's at the day it's white copied for a meeting. Were you saying this item in particular was very difficult because there's a lot of technical issues, and so process-wise that would have been good, or were you raising other process concerns with this item?
It's just the former.
Okay.
It was a perfect example of why an item should be made available publicly when it's circulated to commissioners. We could have benefited tremendously from folks actually knowing what was in it. I had a handful. My staff had many more ex parte meetings when the parties were told certain things that I think they got, in true, they may not have had a fullest picture of what they are briefed on, and so when they checked, they'd say, hey, we have concerns on this. It did not match up with what I had read. And I'm not allowed by the rules to clarify for them what they may have.
So do you just make facial expressions like?
I try. This sounds stupid and maybe it sounds naive, but I try to honor the rules and not be someone who would be in violation by doing such a thing. But I want to answer your previous question, and read it back for me.
Sure. The first was the process for the forbearance item, and then the second was the process for the small business exemption item.
So the process for the small business item, I think, while you don't get to see early drafts, it changed substantially from the direction that I read and where they were going. And I think that's problematic. And at the process, in terms of timing, you got it out at 8 o'clock the night when most people were tuned into the Republican debate. It could have been something done much differently, and I suspect there was a reason for why they moved the course they did. And I think just substantively we should move forward. I know there's legislation on the Hill to do so. I think there's tremendous pressure from those leaders on the Hill who've looked at this issue, and hopefully the Commission, if it waits till all of next year to do so, will take the right action then.
Okay, thanks.
I just had a brief comment on the process point. Commissioner O'Reilly's proposal for making these items public is so important, and I know this probably doesn't excite the heartland, but I can't tell you how many meetings we have, ex parte meetings, after something is circulated. Well, the party will sit down with us, and after the pleasantry say, well, we understand that the item does A, B, and C, and each one of those things might be off by a certain amount. And then we have to spend time trying to educate them about what is actually in the item, but we can't actually show them the items. We have to have this sort of in-person game of telephone. Regardless of political affiliation, it's just such a waste of everybody's time. And I think it's not just the parties to a proceeding, but just the American public generally would like to have some greater insight well in advance, as would the press, I would imagine, so you can understand exactly.
Well, they give us the items. We thought they give them to you, so we can just forward them.
Oh, that would be terrific. Thanks. You can tweet it at me as well if you'd like.
It's my understanding from all the good work that they've been reporting, there are lots of press briefings.
Any other questions?
Don't go episode 1, man.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to raise that again. Do either of you have an opinion on whether the commission should do anything based on the DSTAC report? Do you have any comment on that?
No, I am looking closely at the issue. I have spent a great deal of time in my life on the issue of set-top boxes. I am suspect, but I have some more work to do on my part in terms of actually taking action. The statute doesn't require that the commission take any action. We have fulfilled the obligation under the statute, but I have some more work to do on my end. But I'm suspect that we should be doing something in the space of this time.
Likewise.
Okay.
So you hadn't seen the item, the U.S. Telecom item, when you were up on the dais. Why did you vote on it if you hadn't seen it?
I read the U.S. Telecom forbearance petition. Is that where?
Oh, I thought that you were saying
I hadn't
that.
seen the letters. Which part?
No, I thought you hadn't seen the U.S. Telecom forbearance petition. But there was confusion, as Dave was talking about what exactly was in the item.
There was the piece that I had. I'll clarify as best I can. Hopefully I will, and hopefully.
Okay, I could have missed it.
Let me explain. The item is longer and included a piece related to the Remote Areas Fund. Mm-hmm. That piece I read and was part of the item. It was the piece that was struck. Mm-hmm. So I knew it was there, but it was the piece that we just struck from it. It wasn't something that I hadn't read. I was familiar with it and had it on that piece.
So you hadn't seen the final version of it? Is that a fair way to say?
I think
that's the final version of the yes, but we knew that the final version simply excised the portion which each of us had.
Sure,
I
understand. Yep. Any more questions? It's not a one-man. All right. Well, on that, I wish everyone a very happy holiday season, and we look forward to seeing everyone next year. Thanks.
Absolutely.